And hello to you all. I'm sure everybody already knows this, but Mrs. Eddy was quite an advocate for uniting and loving the church. Initially, as you know, she thought that science and health was going to be adopted by all the churches. And when it wasn't, that never stopped her from loving the churches and maintaining relationship with a host of ministers throughout her lifetime, even those who really didn't understand or agree with her theology. She says, speaking of our relationship with other churches, she says, why not remain friends? And you can find that part in miscellaneous writings. But it's kind of sweet in telling. Well, Embrace Fully is now endeavoring to reach out to other faith-based groups to help us in our work, especially with angel teams, as the need for workers is just far larger than one group can possibly handle. And since we are in the beginning stages of this outreach, we thought it just be a great idea to talk with Chris Slaughter. And he is a Christian scientist who serves on the board of Thanksgiving Square in Dallas, Texas. And we just had our conference at Thanksgiving Square in Dallas. And it's an organization that is well known throughout the interfaith community throughout America. And I'll just let Chris tell you more about his organization, what they do, and why he joined with them, and why it's so important to establish and celebrate our religious diversity. And Chris and his wife attend Third Church in Dallas, Texas. Very cool church. And we are absolutely delighted to have you with us tonight, Chris. So, hello.
Hello, everybody. I can't tell you how grateful I am for the work you all are doing and for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation tonight. David was telling me about my involvement in Thanksgiving Square, and it might be helpful just to have a little bit of background on that organization. It's celebrating its 60th year this year. It's founded in 1964 with a mission to put the power of gratitude in the center of what the city of Dallas values and stands for. And virtually all the most powerful leaders, business, civic, religious, came together to form this organization and support it. And it was inspired and has had a really important impact on our community in different ways through the years. And over the next decade after they were founded, they were able to buy a piece of property, which was land that was in the center of the financial power in downtown Dallas, and build there a three-acre garden, which is now known as Thanksgiving Square. It's a beautiful place, beautiful building designed by Philip Johnson, white spiral building with a stained glass spiral ceiling, and you may have even seen some pictures of it, or the building itself, or maybe even this spiral stained glass window. It's been featured in some movies and other things, but it's a beautiful place. And it's a place designed to give people a refuge right in the center of the hubbub of a busy business center. And it's had, different ways of attracting people through the years. But there were many Christian Scientists that were involved in those early years, members of Third Church. And that was 60 years ago, was about the time I was graduating from high school. So as a young adult, I always had awareness of the Thanksgiving Foundation and Thanksgiving Square as it was being developed, and learned about it some from fellow church members and friends of our family. But over time, I had different levels of interest in it, just because there were different levels of interest going on, everything in my life. But eventually I got fully involved and spent 7 years as the president and CEO of the foundation. And after that, had been supporting it by being on the board of directors. But I think that's probably what influenced my involvement in interfaith work more than anything else through the years. Um,
I was just going to ask you about that. What was it that you were expecting to get out of your involvement there?
well, I was mainly wanting to be part of an organization that promoted gratitude as a priority for a community. And even to with the depth of work in that area, that the expectation was that Dallas could become known as the city of gratitude. And, you know, it wasn't founded because of this, but it certainly had some attraction because of the negative impact that the Kennedy assassination had on Dallas in 1963. And there were many years after that, I think, where Dallas was trying to find itself and trying to create a culture that was based on something way beyond the negatives of that situation. And gratitude is, as a Christian Scientist, it just was a natural attraction.
You know, can you just tell us a little bit about how you, as a Christian Scientist, got interested in exploring other faith traditions, especially knowing that you're going to be exposed to faith traditions who are openly antagonistic or even hostile to Christian Science, and why you felt that was so important to do so?
I was really interested in getting to know and make friends outside of my comfortable circle. And people of different faith traditions were a natural target for that. And I was even interested in those faith traditions that made me feel uncomfortable. I really got pushed along in this direction after I attended a talk in my maybe first year or two of being the president of the foundation, when we had a speaker come in. It was Doug Johnston, who is the founder of the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy, based in Washington, D.C. And he came and spoke at Thanksgiving Square and talked about his work in Afghanistan and Pakistan to go into the madrasas. This is an American Christian, okay, not a Muslim, who went into Afghanistan and Pakistan to show the imams in those madrasas how they could be teaching peace as it was found in the Quran. So he did this from the effort of speaking from their perspective as much as he possibly could. And after this talk was over, I went up and asked him, I said, you know, I'm probably not going to go to those parts of the country and do those kind of things, but what should I do if I really want to have an impact like what you're doing and get started? And he said, go to a mosque and make friends. And I thought, oh, great. I was sort of not really comfortable thinking about that. But I spent some time praying about this. And what happened was I found myself having opportunities to go to mosques, to attend worship services and other events, eventually made friends there, made friends with the imams and their families. My wife and I would have dinner together with the leaders of these Islamic centers. And it just became a sort of a template for me on how to enter into worship centers of other faith traditions.
Were you comfortable doing that at first?
No, I was totally uncomfortable.
What was the most uncomfortable thing about it?
Well, just the ignorance of it all. I just didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have any idea of how I would be received. What I found was they're just like all the rest of us. When you come into their worship center, they've got people there that are welcoming you. They recognize strangers, and they are just ready to just guide you and befriend you and help you feel comfortable, just like you would if you came into a Christian Science church, and the greeters were there to help people feel comfortable. And so fortunately, there were a few of those people in the mosque that I had met from some interfaith council meetings that we had. And so I did have a face or two that I could sometimes interact with in those early days.
Yeah.
But I felt uncomfortable going into lots of different kinds of churches, whether even Catholic churches, Jewish synagogues, Mormon churches, Hindus, Buddhists, Zoroastrians,
Wow.
Center for Religious Center for Spiritual Living, and even
Wow.
those churches that were primarily focused on ministering to the LGBTQ plus community. All of
Mhm.
those were foreign places for me, and eventually just became really comfortable places to go to.
Well, when we've talked before, you use the words interfaith and multi-faith, and can you just describe for everybody the difference? What is interfaith work and what is multi-faith work, and why is it important?
Yeah, and I didn't know all of this in the beginning. Had the religious leaders I ended up getting involved with helped me to understand that more fully. I see, and other people may have different ways of different perspectives on this, but I see interfaith work is people getting together to meet each other and get to know each other personally and have some basic introductions to the different theologies that these people have, and basically a way to make friends and interact on a regular basis. So there was a comfort level between people that looked different, prayed different, and just wouldn't probably have had any other opportunity to get together if it weren't for something specifically intended for that. The difference for me with multi-faith is that this is people of different faith traditions that come together not just to make friends. That's just secondary. What they want to do is they want to get together with people. These would, in my situation, were all clergy leaders. Not in the interfaith group I'm in, it's mainly lay people. But in the multi-faith work that involves clergy leaders, they already know a lot about everybody else's theology because they've been to different kinds of seminaries and had studies in all these different religions, but they just wanted to interact with leaders from the other tribes that they couldn't have contact with or had very hard to have contact with otherwise. So to have an organized group that brought clergy leaders together was an answered prayer for them. In fact, that's the exact words some of those people told me as we got this started, was this is what they've really want. I always thought these people are way too busy with their own flock and trying to just preach on Sundays or whatever they do to get together and talk to people from church leaders from other religions. And what I found was that wasn't the case at all. They were starving for the opportunity to interact with their peers in other faith traditions.
Yeah. I know in the seminary I went to, it was what I would call, just like you said, a multi-faith seminary. In fact, I remember day one of my classes, the professor said, if you brought your theology with you here to class, please take it outside.
Right.
Well, that was actually what kind of opened everything up for everybody, because we couldn't really hide behind our theology and we couldn't talk theologically, if you will. We just had to talk to each other, and that made a big difference. I kind of wanted to understand here, and I think others would too, is that how did you think that you, as a Christian Scientist, might have an impact on other faith traditions?
I think it's so important
Or
for,
did you?
well, it's hard to know, but I think so. I think in most areas, Christian Scientists, people aren't aware of Christian Scientists. And in fact, one of the questions we ask at our church sometimes, just to sort of bring ourselves to reality, is what if our church ceased to exist? Would anybody notice?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that inspired me to try to be out in the community, identified as a Christian Scientist, um, um, and um, and just let. I didn't go out there to sell Christian Science. I went out there to be a Christian Scientist and interact with people doing good things.
Hmm.
And I found that everybody that I interacted with um, was receptive to having me as a Christian Scientist in the group,
Hmm.
just as they were everybody else of all the other different faith traditions.
Hmm.
And I think
So,
sometimes we have conversations because sometimes were glad to have me fill in the blanks for them on some things they didn't know about Christian Science.
mhm,
And so there were opportunities to do that, but I was there mainly to listen, not to be the one selling,
you know,
except by having, I wanted people to get to know Christian Science by my actions, not by my sales pitch.
wow, that's pretty cool. Um, what was the reaction when other Christian Scientists that you know, especially those in the Christian Science Church, found out that you were involved with interfaith work? Were there any challenges that you faced from Christian Scientists?
I never heard any. Um, what I found was people were just so grateful that somebody was out in the community doing something.
Mhm.
And they were just glad that Christian Science was being represented in these groups. Um, now, I wasn't the first one. There were a number of people through history who, from our church, from Third Church, who have participated in the Thanksgiving Square Interfaith Council. Um, there were people, other members of Third Church who had been on the board of the Thanksgiving Foundation before me. Some of them, almost all of them, were practitioners.
Hmm.
Some of them were State Committee on Publication people, and others were just people interested in being a Christian Scientist out in the community and participating in the good these groups were doing.
Oh. Did you find that the interfaith work challenged your own theology in any way? In
I
other words, has it changed any of your own take on Christian Science theology? I guess my question.
I wouldn't say it's challenged it. I think it's helped me want to be making sure I have an even deeper understanding of Christian Science because I think two things. One, I think that makes me have better actions,
Hmm.
the way I act, the way I talk. And um, and I think that well, I just lost my train of thought. But I think that the challenge was not to my understanding or theology, any part of the theology, but it just made me more comfortable that some of the basics that are part of Christian Science are the basics of almost all these other faith traditions as well, such
Yeah.
as love God, love your neighbor, follow the golden rule. In fact, at Thanksgiving Square, there's a
Mhm.
beautiful mosaic, the Golden Rule mosaic. It's a reproduction of a painting that is depicting people of all cultures and faith traditions by Norman Rockwell. That is known as the Golden Rule painting. And so that's central to what Thanksgiving Square promotes.
Yeah, that's so powerful. It's so impactful being there and seeing that too. Has your interfaith involvement with Thanksgiving Square changed the way that you explain Christian Science to those of other faith traditions?
Well, I'd spent some time as the Committee on Publication for Texas. So I got a lot of practice talking about Christian Science to non-Christian scientists during that time. So it sort of got me ready for Thanksgiving Square. And I was pretty comfortable. And I'd worked out some pretty good, for me, comfortable ways of giving brief explanations about Christian Science. Um, but I, I think that the main thing that I learned was don't try to talk like you're representing Christian Science. Just talk like you're telling people what my experience is as a Christian Scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, that way I don't have the burden of trying to get it all exactly right the way somebody would approve. It's more of my experience as a Christian Scientist and what that's done for me.
So that probably would help when you're talking about it, that people would probably get it because you sort of are explaining it not from an official perspective, if you will.
More personal.
Yeah, right. Much more.
And
So
I try to start out with some of the basic things about how Christian Science is a Bible-based religion focused primarily on the teachings of Jesus, and that we follow the golden rule, and we try to be good citizens, and then stop and listen and let them ask questions, or sometimes that's all they want.
yeah.
And, or sometimes things come up later, but I really try to be more of a listener than a talker.
Right. Yeah, that's good. So what's your 30-second elevator speech explaining Christian Science today versus, let's say, when you first got involved in interfaith work? I imagine they were quite different.
Yeah. Well, it's somewhat
Not that I'm trying to put you on
the
the spot. You don't have to come up with any 30-second elevator speech.
No, I've got them down. I've got more than one.
All right, let's hear it.
It depends a little bit on who I'm talking to. If I'm
Mhm.
talking to a mainline Protestant person, it's mainly just letting them know that Christian Science is Bible-based. It's focused on the teachings of Jesus. It has emphasis on the way Jesus demonstrated healing in his ministry, and it sometimes they ask, well, what about the word science? Why is that in there?
Yeah.
I say that because Jesus had his ministry where everything he did, he proved. And what Christian Scientists try to do is learn the best they can the way that Jesus made his theology provable by demonstrating. And that's the efforts that we have as Christian Scientists.
Yeah.
If I'm talking to a Muslim, for example, I like to share with them that unlike almost all other Christian religions, Christian Scientists don't see Jesus as God. And what I learned from talking with Muslims about that was that they have more, Jesus is mentioned more times in the Quran than Muhammad, and that they have a lot of respect for Jesus, but they also don't see him as God. And so that helped to kind of build a bridge with, another Abrahamic religion that would otherwise seem really, really different.
There's been so much said in the media and from the pulpit about Christian Science and doctors or medical sciences, and it's certainly not all positive. So how do you address their concerns when you're talking to people? Their questions, their concerns, or even their anger of maybe somebody's lost a friend, Christian Science treatment. How do you deal with that?
So many times when I'm just talking to people and the subject of Christian Science comes up, and they say, oh, my grandmother was a Christian Scientist, or this family member, or whatever. But somehow it stopped. And I don't ever really, usually don't know why. But so people have various kinds of experiences, backgrounds, and thoughts about how great or not great Christian Science is. But one of the things I try to make sure they understand is that there's nothing in our church that dictates the way Christian Scientists make decisions about their healthcare. That's all a personal decision that's made by people based on their thoughts about what they're ready to be demonstrating or not. And just like in any other culture, society, or whatever, it's never okay for people to suffer, particularly children and seniors. And Christian Scientists are very sensitive to that, to make sure that we care for each other in loving ways, to make sure that we're doing the practical things that are the best for those around us and those people that we're influencing their healthcare in some way or another.
Yeah, thanks for that. When you meet with other people of other faith traditions, what would you say is their biggest challenge or obstacle, in being engaged in interfaith work?
What people in other faith traditions you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, we've got problems talking about what we believe. What do you think? What comes up? What do you hear? From others that challenge them about speaking publicly about their own theological beliefs.
I think it's the same for everybody. That people are not always sure in the beginning of just how to be talking about it, how to be talking about their faith tradition with other people. I think that if I think other people I think anybody, whether it's in our church or other churches, just the whole challenge of getting started in interfaith work is not always easy. And I think in most faith traditions, maybe a maximum of 10% of the people are even interested in interfaith work. And not because, I think the majority of us isn't because they don't like it or they think it's bad. They just are too busy and too challenged in learning their own theology and trying to practice their own to even think about trying to throw in other people's ideas and then trying to sort all that out in their mind. So I think that challenge is probably the biggest obstacle for people getting into interfaith work.
Yeah, I can't tell you though, I've had people show up at my doorstep that wanted to challenge me as a Christian Scientist.
Oh, well, it's not that I never get challenged, but usually people that are getting started interfaith work are already predisposed to wanting to be understanding.
Yeah, right.
Oh, there are plenty of people out there that can use more information.
Right. I thought the most interesting folks that showed up at my door once had a picture. On one side was heaven, beautiful mountains and streams, and everybody's happy and whatnot. The other side was this obviously dark, foreboding, very evil place, with flames coming out of the lake of fire. And they said, "Where would you like to spend eternity?"
Well,
I'm thinking. So, why do you think more Christian Scientists are not involved in interfaith work, and what's holding our members back? What do you think we're afraid of?
well, you all have the challenge in doing prison ministry. Why aren't people more interested in getting into prison ministry? It's a similar kind of thing to me, I think, as far certain things interest certain people in different ways. And in both of those, in the prison ministry and interfaith, there are challenges in that are going to take people's thought and time, a lot of time and a lot of thought and a lot of dedication, much more so in prison ministry even than interfaith work. But I think that if I find somebody who's somewhat interested, I try to do everything I can to take them by the arm and introduce them to what we're doing so they can come see it and sort of conquer their fears or fear of the unknown and the comfort levels that would come with that. And sometimes it takes and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people find out that they really don't want to devote the time to it. Not that it takes huge amounts of time, but it does take a day here, a day there, and different meetings to go to, and sometimes even having to participate in putting together meetings. It's just like any other kind of outside activity.
Yeah, right. Well, what have you learned about other religious faith traditions that make you more accepting of them, and especially if you disagree with their fundamental theology?
Well, I mentioned some of those things about Islam, that the conversations I've had with imams are very challenging because they are really well educated
Yeah.
and skillful theologians and pastors. But what I found was that they were also skilled in talking to non-Muslims about the Quran or their theology and putting it in terms that are more likely to be understood. One of the real challenges is so much of Islam is all done in Arabic.
Yeah.
And for them to feel like they're really understanding it and getting the true message, they're going to speak it in Arabic, much like Jewish people speak much of theirs in Hebrew.
Yeah.
And fortunately, there are enough of those people that I've run into at the mosques that are skilled enough in communicating both in English and in Arabic so that they can help people like me get the basics. But I think one of the most eye-opening things was this thing about how they see Jesus and how much of a part Jesus is in their theology, and the fact that it's mentioned more in the Quran than Muhammad is. That
No,
was
that's
just my
amazing.
eye.
I didn't realize that.
I didn't either, but
Wow.
there are things, and so many things in different, well, um, I just really enjoy going to a Jewish temple, whether it's for a service or for some other meeting, because it's so steeped in culture.
Hmm.
And the conversations that I have are just in such a different perspective and platform than what I'm used to. And just the whole nature of Judaism is arguing and not agreeing and having
Hmm.
different concepts about Judaism. I mean, there's not one way to think about it, and realizing the fact that they're all not thinking the same thing.
Wow.
They're all trying to figure it out themselves. Um, but then going into non-Abrahamic worship centers like Buddhist and Hindu, um, and just trying to grasp um, the nature of some of those um, faith traditions that aren't even, it's it's not even a one God kind of thing in many cases.
Right. Right.
But as I listen to them more, all those different gods they've got are sort of like different ways of seeing God.
Hmm.
Um, and they just have done it in a way that they've named them all in different names and other things. Um, but, as Christian scientists, we find different ways of thinking about what God is through the seven synonyms. And it's not like we have different gods, but
Right.
we're thinking about the various ways that God is there. And
Yeah.
so, um, to me, learning some of the basic things like that make me feel so liberated,
Hmm.
and not just as just compartmentalized as I might be otherwise.
Yeah. Do you have any stories that you could share that kind of illustrate how interfaith work is effectively breaking down religious walls and any prejudices?
Um, well,
Again, I'm not trying to put you on a spot. I'm
no,
just
I'm thinking about one of the things that we did um, was one of the leaders of Faith Forward Dallas was a African American pastor and very knowledgeable civil rights leader, and he organized a civil rights pilgrimage from Dallas to Atlanta for a week on a bus. And I went on that with them, and there were people there of all races and many different faith traditions. And we did it at the same time they had the MLK 50, I think it's what. Anyway, just a few years ago. And so we went to Jackson and Memphis and throughout Alabama and Selma and Montgomery and eventually to Atlanta. And this particular pastor had his wife and kids with him, and the Muslim imam had his wife and kids with him. So there were families and individual people like me, and we all got to know each other pretty well riding the bus for a week. And that in itself was an eye-opener and was so rewarding personally for me to feel like I made close enough friends with these people to be interacting with their kids and their families. But in the greater picture of what was going on there also, it was a very liberating trip for me to be able to learn so deeply the things that are in our history as a country, and seeing that from the perspective of so many different cultures all together at the same time, but being led by somebody who was a clergy leader and had a real knowledge of civil rights history. So that was a real, to me, a life-changing experience I had only because I was involved in interfaith work.
That's not something you would have just done anyways.
No, I wouldn't have known how to do it.
Yeah.
And this person was so deep into it, he had actual civil rights leaders from history there to meet us along the way. And
wow.
And all these different stories. Anyway, we walked across the bridge and
Selma.
Selma, yeah.
Yep.
The Edmund Pettus Bridge together, and he was telling one of the lady that was leading us had walked across it as an 11-year-old girl during the walk. And so, I mean, we had, that was probably the most life-changing experience I had because I was in interfaith work.
Yeah, sounds like that would be an impactful one for sure. Chris, we're down to our last moments here before our audience gets involved. So big question here is, what steps would you advise those Christian Scientists or us wishing to get involved in interfaith work to take in order to get involved? And what would you caution?
Yeah, I think the most practical thing to do is to first tell yourself that you are brave enough to do this. You do have an interest in this. You know it'll be beneficial to you and your church and your faith tradition. And then find an active interfaith group in your community, if there is one. And in most cases, there is something going on. And ask how you can participate. And then pray about how you can be ready for that experience and they can be ready for you. And go to serve, go to listen, and go to grow and see where that leads. And if it doesn't lead you to a lot of different worship centers and meeting a lot of different people that don't look like you and don't speak like you, don't pray like you, and don't eat the same food you do, if you're not getting all that, you're missing out. You got to get all of that.
Love it. All right, let's turn this over to, it looks like we've already got a hand up here for you, Chris. Marilyn.
So is it all right if I share real quickly how the Ventura Church does interfaith Thanksgiving services? It's been at different churches in the area. It's been at the Jewish temple, Christian temple. I forget all of them. It's been going on for a few years. The last couple or 3 years, it's been at the San Buenaventura Mission, and the Thanksgiving interfaith meeting is the Saturday before Thanksgiving. And the Christian Science portion, the congregation is very used to the participation. It's the responsive reading to the Thanksgiving lesson sermon. And they just pass that out, and the congregation is used to really pitching in, enthusiastically taking turns reading the Thanksgiving responsive reading from our quarterly. And then it's followed by a solo. And then other faiths participate as well. And after each different congregation has given their portion of the Thanksgiving blessings, there is a potluck afterwards in the garden at the mission. And it's just a wonderful chance for us to integrate as brothers and sisters. So I just want to say that's been going on for a few years, and it's not customary just to always be at the same church. It's possibly to keep rotating.
Thank you. Bonnie.
Yes, I would like to ask a question about when when you ask them or they ask you about, especially if you ask them how they pray, tell me about it. I mean, I'd like to know how the conversation evolves in understanding that, because we have such a distinct form of prayer. And where's their mindset as they begin? Or is it really ritual, or what is it?
And of course, it runs the full gamut with all these different faith traditions. And even sometimes within the faith, there are these different faith traditions, there's a lot of differences. What I found was I don't ever get the same kind of conversation, even when I'm talking to people separately that are in the same faith tradition. It's an open topic, and you're going to hear everything. In talking about the few times that we really get to talk about the specifics of how do you pray, that's a really rare opportunity if you've got the group focusing on something that's that specific. But people like to hear, people I found love to hear what our daily prayer is.
Yeah.
They thought, whoa, that's a good prayer. That covers a lot. So I didn't find it ever really necessary to get too deep into try to explain everything, other than to say that our prayer is as spiritual as we can possibly be. And it's not based so much on specific words, but it's based more on listening to God. And what I found out was a lot of times these different faith traditions have a real propensity to verbalize prayers in their own kind of words. But when I really talk to them about it, they say what really matters to them when they're praying is when they get quiet.
I've been a chaplain in the prisons, and it ends up the first thing that they want to learn is how to pray, because they've never been taught how to pray. It's all rote, repeating.
Right.
And
you've probably found some good ways to explain that.
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, the easiest way to explain it is having your own experience in praying and what is the result of it.
Right.
What comes to you. And when that happens, all of a sudden their thought opens up to receptivity.
Yeah, personal experience, personal stories mean the most.
Mm-hmm.
Great. You know, you all talked some about interfaith services. They, I might not be able to see this anyway. This was the Thanksgiving interfaith service this year. We always have them in Dallas the last several years on the Thursday before Thanksgiving. And this year it's going to be at Congregation Shereth Israel. It's one of the Jewish congregations, but last year it was at the Methodist Church, and it's been at other churches. And each time they have a different format. Another interfaith service that was really interesting and I thought inspiring was the Jewish community has an interfaith Seder. I don't know if y'all have ever been to an interfaith Seder before, but it's really instructional in understanding Jewish life. Mm-hmm. And so we've tried to go to those kind of things when the invitation is made. That's another good way to get going in interfaith work, is accept invitations to these kinds of things.
Ted, I see your hand is up. Thank you, Bonnie. Those are great questions.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying listening to your comments, and we're getting ready in May to have a conference here in Washington, D.C. And
Don't stop it.
and the question that I want to ask is about s- pro- helping members of the Christian Science Church look at the community. You've said several things about this, but specifically how to help fellow members in their gain the comfort, gain the confidence, gain the security to talk together with people from other groups and to prepare to welcome returning citizens into the church and into the community.
Well, so to help people get comfortable to participate in a multi-faith group like that, or and then to how to be being a welcoming influence to returning community members when they show up at church. Is that sort of what you're talking about?
Yes, it's loving the fellow members
Right.
at church is the question that I've been thinking about.
Well, I think that I just know in my experience at our church, the years ago when I finally figured out that being a Christian Scientist is not being a perfect Christian Scientist. Being a Christian Scientist is someone who is really trying and studying and finding ways to demonstrate in their own way their best concept of what Christian Science is. And I know in our church community, we do everything we can to make people feel really comfortable about their earliest stages of Christian Science participation and embracing their rudimentary testimonies on Wednesday, embracing their questions that they have, embracing the newness and I think that's true if people are going to be having, one of the things that we learned in our church also was when we really decided that we had to do something to change so that it was in ways that would attract people to actually come to our church and what the different things we would do. And I know one of the people that we were working with during all that time was, okay, once you do that, what are they going to find when they get there? You're doing all these great things to make people want to come, but what's it going to be like when they get there? Are they going to feel happy about it? Are people going to be nice to them? Will they be welcome? Will anybody speak to them? So there were a lot of those basic things to learn about how to be a welcoming congregation.
Thank you.
I hope that helped.
Want to go to Carlos next, and then Marilyn?
Thank you, Chris. That was very interesting conversation in there. But I wanted to thank you also for because when I was in Dallas and I visited your church, third church, for the service, and I was very impressed with the programs you have over there in the church. In our church, we are part of the Interfaith community churches, and we have about 11 churches participate. This past year, we had, and we normally do them in the summertime, in June and July. And it's called Salas Summer Suppers. And the program itself is sponsored by ACTS, Altadena Churches Together Serving. And we get a big attendance in there. And this past meeting, this past summer, I was a speaker in one of the meetings for about 20 minutes, one of the speakers. And my subject was embrace fully. Because not too many churches go to the prisons like Christian Science does. And I do. I don't go to the prison, I go to the county jail. But I'm very impressed with the Interfaith group. They're wonderful people, and they bring their food because we get together for the first hour. We eat. Everybody brings a vegetarian dish, or the ones who can. If you don't bring anything, it's fine. You're welcome anyway. But I eaten some food from them. They bring in. I have eaten Muslim the type of food, the Jewish type of food. I have eaten food from other churches, the people from other churches, and very impressive. And they give us the opportunity to get to know each other. And the first hour is about getting to know each other and feel comfortable and feeling welcome to different churches. And also the second hour, when we had the speakers, we get to learn about what the church is involved with in the community. And I'm very impressed. And I'm very impressed with the Thanksgiving Square program. And I told my church in the membership meeting about that. And I gave them a report. And everybody was very, very impressed about what I went through. So hopefully they will be the same when we meet in Washington.
I'm
So-
glad you brought up food. I should have brought that up. One of the most enjoyable things of getting to know the people of different cultures and different faith traditions is when you get to eat their food, because you really learn about the differences in cultures in just a delicious way.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Carlos.
Let's go to Marilyn.
All right, thank you, Chris. What I'm really impressed with is the way you so bravely attended all of the church services at the various religions. And it's something I have been wanting to do, but I haven't had the courage yet.
Just go.
Yeah. I was going to share that there's two more intimate interfaith groups that I've been involved with in the Reno, Nevada area. One of them is called Prayers Without Borders. And it's a group, between 8 and 12 people that get together, and we always share food. And it's just delightful. But one thing that they heard that I'm a volunteer chaplain in the prison. And so they very quickly want me to offer the first prayer or offer a prayer. And you know what's awkward is I have lots of prayers that I've memorized in Christian Science, the daily prayer and the tenets and so forth. But to just offer a spontaneous prayer, I'm really weak at that. I struggle. So I usually just do one of our prayers. I do the daily prayer or something like that, which they love. But I just was sharing that it's been very awkward when they wanted me to do something spontaneous, because I think Christian Scientists don't tend to do that. We see other faiths get together and they will just say, let me pray for you out loud, and they'll come up with spontaneous prayer. So I don't know if you've encountered that, Chris.
Well, I have, and I've handled it different ways at different times. And I've always liked, after I've heard other people give what you call spontaneous prayers, I've thought, we as Christian Scientists can do that. It's just a matter of being confident enough to know what we're praying. And it doesn't have to be a pre-written prayer, although there have been many times where I've used the daily prayer There's sometimes when I use a poem like A Grateful Heart, a Garden is Hymn, and that's been really big with Thanksgiving Square. I use that one all the time because that's what Thanksgiving Square is. A Grateful Heart, a Garden is. But I think, and sometimes I've taken the daily prayer and just adapted the main points of that relate to things going on in our community. And so there are lots of ways to do it, and it's fun to try different ones, and some turn out better than others.
Yeah, I'm definitely just learning.
Yeah.
So Marilyn, Jerry Davenport, the wife of Dick Davenport, she has a workshop
Oh,
where for Christian Scientists on offering prayers, because she's
Oh.
been to seminary.
oh,
And yeah,
okay.
she,
I'll look her up.
I don't know if it's already finished, but she was gonna offer the same workshop through Prayerful Living, which is Mark Mullenbrock's site. So I don't know if that happened, but the one I attended was a month and a half ago.
Great. Thank you for that. I do belong to Prayerful Living, so I can look that up.
You know, one of the things, going back on the offering prayers, one of the things that I'm very comfortable with is when one of these clergy leaders or others starts a prayer with, I'm going to address the God of many names, because people in different faith traditions favor different names for their deity. And oftentimes they will then delineate those different names that they're aware of. That seems to help bring people in those cases also. Anyway, just being aware that God is God. Some people just use different words for it.
So I have a question for you, Chris, and I wanted to just start by saying thank you so much for sharing your experiences with this group. We had more than 50 people tune in tonight, quite a bit of interest in this topic. My question for you is, as part of your work in that interfaith world, have you been led to sort of bring opportunities to participate as a church in greater community activity alongside other churches? Is that something that you've had as part of your experience, or?
Yes. Well, one of the things is the one that you got to experience with us was the Thanksgiving Square National Day of Prayer Luncheon. And that's one of the things that our church participates in as a group, and gets a table and has a presence, and people in our church have really liked that. And some members of our church also separately get a table that they will mix in with maybe non-science friends to come see all of this. Our church also has really been working on doing things that just naturally and comfortably allow our members to be involved in things in the community. And one of the things that's coming up here in just a few days is our annual gratitude event, which is really a festival at our parking lot that invites the community in to share with us things that they're grateful for and the importance of gratitude in their lives. And each time we do that as a church, we always include first responders, the local police department, and they come as part of that. And also one other nonprofit organization that we want to feature and celebrate and support. And one of them was Cafe Momentum in the years past, and you all who came to the meeting in Dallas learned some about Cafe Momentum. And Last year was a community garden that has gotten very, very strong and kind of a food desert part of our city. And we celebrated them and they came and told about their organization. And this year it's actually going to be the Thanksgiving Foundation. The 60th anniversary was sort of the perfect time to feature them, and they're going to come for that. So that's a natural thing that we're now doing on an annual basis in our church that specifically brings in others. And Woody's got something to add on that.
Yeah, let me just jump in and thank you, Chris. And two things. Some of you may not know this, but as a result of that Thanksgiving Square annual luncheon, I went to sit at Chris's table. This is 2 years ago, and leaving that luncheon, there was almost I think over 500 people there 2 years ago. Last year it was almost close to 600.
It was 650 this year.
650. But 2 years ago, I ran into Richard Miles, who was spoke at our annual conference and has now become a partner with Embrace Fully here in Dallas. So that was one bit of fruitage from just that meeting. And I'll hitchhike on one more thing that Chris mentioned about the annual gratitude event. This is the 4th annual gratitude event. It's a community gratitude event that we have at Third Church. And in addition to what Chris mentioned, and he did mention first responders, they've been part of this all along, but we are honoring Faith in Blue Weekend, which you can go to faithandblue.org. It's a national organization that bridges local police with the community through faith-based organizations like ours, our Third Church of Christ Scientists. And we were approached by the Dallas police 2 years ago to host an event just for Faith in Blue. And we did. And because we did, this year we're wrapping it into the annual gratitude event. So we're kind of splitting it. We're going to have the morning on Faith in Blue, and the afternoon we're going to honor Thanksgiving Square. But you could look up Faith in Blue. It's a perfect opportunity to share your gratitude to the local responders and certainly police in your area, and use it as an excuse to hold an event, to hold a community event. And you can do this. You can do it in your parking lot, or your foyer, or a local park.
I just pasted in the link to the Third Church Dallas website, your events page, which conveniently is sharing what your invitation to this event looks like, because I think that's a really great thing if folks here are a member of a church and maybe would think about doing something like this in your own church. I'm guessing you guys will be fine if people copy this idea. It's worth doing.
We'd love to have you copy it. I mean,
Everybody should do it.
And we'd be happy to help. I mean, it's amazing. We've learned a lot in 4 years. And it was really initiated by the reading room librarian, who still coordinates the whole event. But it gets the whole church involved with the community in many different ways. And if you do it every year, it gets easier.
Yeah. And Woody, it's family-based, family-focused, and kids are coming, the whole idea is to bring the kids and let them get involved and see how all this works. And, we have a bounce house, we have a food truck, we have all this other stuff. It's a festival.
And we, this year, for the 4th year, we've been inviting the local merchants up and down the street along the way. And so we have a list of about 50 or 60 local merchants. And last year we had PNC Bank want to sponsor a table.
Nice.
Well, they've wanted to come back again this year. And when AT&T found out about it, AT&T wants to be a local sponsor. So this all helps in covering costs of food and that kind of thing. It's really quite a neat model.
For the food truck, is it just do you guys pay for that?
Yeah,
we
we are. We're this year we've got well, we've got coffee and donuts in the morning and that's delivered by one of our local Texas-based grocery store called HEB, but Central Market. So they're bringing that, of course, with the police and Faith and Blue. Who doesn't like donuts and whatever? For lunch, we've got a food truck coming by.
Ruthie's
and-
Food Truck specializes in grilled cheese sandwiches.
Nice.
Ruthie's?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
So
they're also
if-
tied in with Cafe Momentum.
they are,
Yeah.
and which is beautiful. And they serve sandwiches, and we're footing the bill for that. So people are going to get a complimentary lunch when they come.
And do you guys have a sense of about how many people have attended these over the last?
Well, last year we had close to 100. This year we're expecting close to 200. So we want to grow it every year, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It's October 12th, coming right up.
Seems
No,
like
the
an
real-
awesome idea.
The real benefit is our church members are getting used to having something that brings in other people.
Right. So they can bring their friends and family and so forth.
I've talked to a lot of church members in the Christian Science community, and I've heard repeatedly, maybe if an idea like this was brought up, maybe a question like, well, is this what we're supposed to be doing as part of our church? And I guess, do you have any thoughts on that as far as what your experience has been with that?
Yes. And I think Chris mentioned it up front, and it's right in the title of the event. It's an annual community gratitude event. This isn't about us, although the reading room will be there and we'll have a Christian Science monitor table and so forth. But this is about honoring the community and bringing the community together and expressing gratitude. And we have several activities going on, including at the children's level, in terms of expressing gratitude. At the adult level, we're going to have a testimony board, testimonies of healing, written by current members in very simple way, so that the public can see what's going on and how we're expressing gratitude for the healings that we're experiencing.
I love it. I think I want everybody here to screenshot that, save it, copy it, take it back to your church and say, hey, why aren't we doing this? Annalisa, I see your hand is up.
You're muted.
Yeah. Or
Got
maybe
answered a second ago. It was like, what is the, oh. Hang on. Am I okay now? Can you hear me? Okay. So I think my question just got answered a second ago. Like, what's the program? What does it involve? And I love hearing that this is for the community, and so it's encouraging them to express gratitude. And but it's not like we have a Christian Science lecture and we're gonna do that. Although I guess that could be. But do you want to speak a tiny bit more about that, either, Chris?
What do you want to go for that?
Yeah, a tiny bit more about, you mean what's on the agenda or how we're covering the event? What would you like, Annalise?
I think I heard you, Annalisa, was when the question comes up, should there be something that's sort of normal Christian Science programming in the event? And we have elected not to have a lecturer. I don't think we ever have at this event, or a speaker but we have Christian Science people that are there that are doing a normal welcoming, some basic explaining of what this is, but we don't try to have it be what we do. It's different than other things we do. I mean, we'll have half a dozen lectures a year, but this is different than that.
Yes, and we're not, we're transparent from the standpoint it's in our parking lot, and the church is right there.
Yeah, we
we
want
do
to
have
see, we want
the
people
reading-
to see activity.
Yeah, the reading
wanna see-
room has a tent and they have what they offer. As I mentioned, we have the Christian Science Monitor and we'll have a table for them. But it's really an opportunity to interact and give gratitude to the community.
And to
And-
do it out in the open air, where
Mm,
everybody
right.
that's walking by can see, hey, what's going on in these Christian Science parking lot here? We're having fun.
We'll have
my-
we'll have a session on the Faith and Blues session, which will be Q&A with the local police. I just sent them a list of 10 questions that I want them to answer and address.
That's
And
been one of
then-
the best parts, Woody, is the police have told their experiences as police officers. both
Right.
men and women. And what their personal life is like being a policeman. They were moving, very moving conversations. These people really opened up in ways you wouldn't expect a police person to do. And it was remarkable.
And then with Thanksgiving Square, of course, we're going to have Kyle Ogden, who's the current president of Thanksgiving Square and the Thanksgiving Square Foundation. And he's going to give a 10-minute talk on Thanksgiving Square. So, and the 60th anniversary. And somebody mentioned earlier, we'll close it with a prayer for the community. And I bet it'll be very much like the daily prayer.
I think the fact that you've got the bounce house there and food, and I mean nothing says, hey parents, bring your kids here like a bounce house and free food. I think that's a great combo there.
We always have a good musician of some kind.
Oh, nice.
And we do have music. That's correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Lynette, I see your hand is up. And
Yeah, just a minute. Can you hear me?
yep.
Okay, let me see. Let me get my video on. I have two questions. One is sort of about the Christian Science community, and one is about the community at large that we're talking about. I am positive that there are certain Christian scientists that will not leave the "this is not a manual-based activity" kind of answer, you know. And so in your churches and how you've grown this, have you just said, well, kind of, oh, well, okay, that's fine. We're just going to go ahead and do what we're going to do. Have you been able to sort of have that thought be leavened? Has it changed your church? That's question number one, which is probably a big one. And the other one, well, I'll wait till you answer that one.
Oh, well, as far as the conversation about being manual based or not manual based, you know, we've had lots of conversations in our church through the years about what is appropriate and what's appropriate. A lot of things we do in our church that people that are regularly done in our church and a lot of others aren't manual based, but they are traditional and cultural. And we don't do anything that we're not supposed to do. Just because something isn't mentioned in the manual doesn't mean it's forbidden. I think that we as a
Right.
church are just trying to respond to what we see as the way to be better healers in our community and be better neighbors in our community and to be supporting all the good work and that goes on in our community by everybody, not just us. and to show gratitude for that. I think our congregation's gotten very comfortable with doing things that are Christian Science based. This is a very Christian Science-like thing to do, is be grateful. And we just try to find ways to do that creatively, that we get good response. And we've tried a lot of things, not everything works, but this one seems to be well received by the community and we also invite and have participation from other branch churches where other people from other churches come in and help help set up and support the activity also. So we don't try to just be us.
So you've gotten people to move away from a very narrow interpretation of what they think the rules are in Christian Science.
Yeah, I know that's a challenge.
Yeah, I have a very conservative
It used to be in
church.
our church too, long ago.
Pardon me?
And Lynette, yeah.
We used to be a problem in our church also years ago.
Yeah.
Sort of moved on beyond it now, and here we go.
And I would just add to that, Lynette, the evolution of Third Church, because 10, 15 years ago, it was exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't in the manual, it didn't get done.
Yeah.
And Woody, at that time, we had 2 members under the age of 50.
Yeah.
Okay, 2.
Right. And
Dying church.
That's right. And
yeah,
today,
that's kind of like at my church is, yeah.
Yeah.
it is
That was a death spiral, and we recognized it, we admitted it, and we said, we're going to have to change, or that won't change. No change means no change.
And I think the biggest change was realizing that we're here to heal, not just ourselves.
Yeah.
Or our families. But how about our neighbors? How about the community? And how about the world? I know that's pretty big, but that was a mission that we took on about 15 years ago. And once we embraced that, and we did that through a series of meetings with the congregation to get them to allow that to emerge as what are we going to do in the future? What do we want to be? What do we want this church to do? Now, the definition is there in the manual. And the definition of church is pretty community-based, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we're demonstrating that, but we had to work at it.
So you had to have meetings and you had to discuss this and it was, it took a while.
It did take a while,
It was
but
a process.
once it changed. And today our congregation looks entirely different than it did 20 years ago when I moved to Dallas.
Yeah.
And you got younger people in your congregation?
Younger people, it's multicultural. It's incredible. It was one socioeconomic niche of our culture 20 years ago. Today,
we have a continuous flow of babies going through our children's room. That's the healthy.
Wow,
yeah.
That's great. If I could just ask the second question, if that's, unless you have more to say.
No, we could take a whole nother.
I know, I feel like I should
go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh.
The other question is, and I'm not at all taking away from what you've accomplished in having community get-togethers, eating each other's food, all that stuff. But have you seen in the community, as a result of this, people from different cultures and different churches coming together and working effectively about social issues that we often stay in our own branch of Christianity or non-Christian, and like say racism or police brutality, or is it spilling over to help in those areas? I mean, it's nice that we eat each other's food, but We're
That,
doing it for bigger reason.
yes, the
Think
answer
somebody
is
like,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, the Faith Forward Dallas Clergy Leaders Group is that multi-faith group I was talking about. They are very active in addressing community issues like social justice, racism, gun violence, homelessness, hunger, education, discrimination of various kinds. They have that organized into groups within Faith Forward Dallas that focuses on each one of those things. And they work very closely with local governments that are looking for a faith community communication and influence on those things. And so as Christian scientists that are, my own activity in that group, I'm the official representative of Third Church, because we don't have a clergy person, but our church has authorized me to be representing the church. Just like in the Mormon community, they don't have clergy either. They have lay people in that group. And we participate in those particular efforts to try to address how to improve things in our community. And have made quite an influence on situations in the North Texas area as they've come up. For example,
great.
when we had in Dallas about 6 or 7 years ago, 6 policemen got killed by a sniper. It's devastating. And the mayor chose Thanksgiving Square as the place to have the community gathering to bring the community together and to work past that crisis in our community. And it was the Faith Forward Dallas clergy leaders he called on to run that meeting for him and to have it be a faith-based effort to heal the community. And so it had a gratitude base, it had a prayer base, it had a multi-faith base, and that was the place where I first saw the leading Jewish rabbi who introduced a young up-and-coming imam who spoke after the rabbi. The rabbi introduced him as my brother and my teacher. So the rabbi was introducing the imam as his brother and his teacher. To me, that stopped my breath when he said that. That's really coming together as a community.
Yeah, that really is. That really is. I'm so glad to hear that. And I would think, and I'm sure that those other activities you had and get-togethers, you know, eating each other's food, having children play together made it possible for you to work together well. You knew each other, you shared each other's ideas, and that made it possible for you to do something and affect a change because you had been together already. You had, you know, already gotten over the initial shock of somebody different. But anyway, so that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it so much.
I think that might be a good time to wrap it up, unless if David, do you have anything more, or Chris, do you have anything else you want to add that we didn't cover?
All I would say is that the work that you're doing is so valuable. It's so important. I'm continually telling people in our church, my concept is that the prison ministry is the second most important, most valuable ministry in our church, right behind the Sunday school. It is so effective and good for the people and good for Christian Science and good for our churches to have us be represented like that by people like you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, and thank you also again for the part that you and the entire Third Church Dallas played in our annual conference last year. It was super appreciated, and that has just reverberated and echoed as time has gone on. Just that
We were honored
hospitality.
that you had your meeting in Dallas and that you had it at Thanksgiving Square.
Yeah, well, it was so excellent. Thanks again to Woody for the suggestion that he made. When he first brought it up, I was like, I don't know what that is. I never heard of it. And it was just inspired. So thank you again, Woody, for that and that connection. Speaking of annual conferences, we are going to be restarting our planning calls for that for our conference in next May. Our first one is going to be this Monday. We've got a good little group of folks that I think are going to be able to make it. If you would like to join us for that, just shoot me an email, gabriel@embracedfully.org, and I can shoot you the Zoom for that. It'll be 2 p.m. Pacific on this upcoming Monday. And yeah, look forward to seeing you all again. Once again, a reminder, our next Zoom call, besides that planning one, will be an Angel Team meeting on October 17th. And yeah, really looking forward to seeing you all and continuing to hear the stories. One last little bit of homework I'll give everybody here. Take whatever town or city or region that your church, if you belong to a church, is in, and just type in that space interfaith council, interfaith group, and just take a look at who's a member of that. Because almost every region has an actual formal, like a website of people, churches, and organizations that have decided to publicly say we're participating in these things. And if you do that, that's a great starting point to then just maybe contact the group or just figure out like, when are they meeting? Maybe I'll just go show up and just check it out if you're led to do so. So thank you everybody for coming tonight. Big thanks. And thank you, David, for such a great interview. Thank you, Chris, for sharing
Thank you, Chris.
your experiences.
Thank you
Really
all.
great.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank
Good
you
night.
so much.